It's Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who episode commentary podcast that tries to accentuate the positive, with me, Toby Haydock.
Hello, Toby. My name is Gary Russell, and I have had one or two small involvements with Doctor Who over the years, nothing particularly major or important compared to most. So the story I've given you to go away and watch is Robots of Death.
Welcome. It's episode 4 of The Robots of Death, a fine Doctor Who story that's had quite a few missives landing in my inbox, because if you are a patron of mine, God, that still feels so awkward. But it's the way things are done these days, and I need to get over myself. I've suggested to patrons, I've given them an idea of the stories coming up to see if there's anything that they can send me that prompts any memories or discussion points. And Duncan Harvey, hello Duncan, and thank you, says, just as an aside, I vividly remember watching this on original TX and also the Christmas repeat. I recently came across a PDF of the Radio Times Christmas 1977 double edition and thought to myself, I remember there being a picture of a VOC on the relevant page of the listings, and sure enough, when I got to the relevant bit, there it was. It really must have seared itself into my memory. I'd have been nearly 7 at the time, and it's always amazing to think of such little moments lodging permanently into your memory. A bit like a message in a bottle that you finally get round to opening. I mean, so much of my childhood is snatched little memories of seeing a bit of Doctor Who and those. I mean, when we didn't have access to the videos and everything, a photo, just a photo was, manna from heaven, and it was something to be cherished. And I think you implanted things in your memory because that was your way of experiencing them, because you knew they weren't to hand. I soak up information so badly these days, and I think it's partially because I know that I just have to click on Wikipedia. Whereas if Wikipedia or whatever, but if it wasn't a click away, I think my brain would be keener to store that information away. And that's why I think the human race's capacity for thought, memory and cognizance is atrophying at an exponential rate, and will all be mushy-brained simpletons within a generation. That's what I've decided. So as one of the last examples of Homo sapiens, come with me as I get sapien about episode 4 of a brilliant Doctor Who story called The Robots of Death. And I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1, now. And this story has been set for me, here we go, by Gary Russell, who was a name to conjure when I was a time tot. He wrote for Doctor Who magazine, but also had the allure of being Dick from the Famous Five, and we had the Famous Five books that had the actors' names on the back, and it was an amazing thing to go, Gary Russell from Doctor Who magazine is Dick from the Famous Five? Amazing! And I've since had the pleasure of meeting him and working with him, and he's a very nice chap. And answered the call, one of the first to answer the call to suggest a story, and of course he suggested one of the best Doctor Who stories of them all, The Robots of Death, starring Tom Baker and Russell Hunter, Lonely from Callan, which was enough to, I think, get this kudos in my house, because Callan was the sort of show that my brothers watched, and it was big and grown up, and people swore and smoked and died and double-crossed each other, and life was tough. But it's a prime example of great character acting and casting against type and getting something really interesting, because I think Russell Hunter's great. I doubt I'm going to pick an individual actor for this story, because they're all very good. I don't think Tarek Yunus really gets enough to do. It's not much of a part. And Tanya Rogers, I think, shows that she's perhaps the least experienced, but I applaud the casting of both of them. And they're fine. I think it's just that in this company, they perhaps come up slightly shorter. Look at that. The lights have gone off. darkness in Doctor Who. That's what you want, Doctor Who. Often Doctor Who is sort of written up as atmospheric and dark, but actually, because of studio lighting, there aren't many stories that actually take place in much darkness. So when the lights go off, but Duncan Brown's lighting here is superb. And this is when this is genuine sort of begging for your life. And people don't say much that's eloquent, I don't think, in times of great stress, apart from no and please. And it's so plaintive and so convincing and hard. That is hard to do, I would say. And she does it well. The robots, we know that the robots, their anonymity is now not necessary. The sharp focus on the Doctor with the robot in focus at the back. This is the kind of beginning of the last episode. The iron fibers have hit the fan. So the stakes are up now. There's a robot revolution. That's a slightly the reaction to having a hat put on you is it is perhaps a little hard to believe, but I do like the fact that SV7, because he's a robot, of course, doesn't lose his rag, just goes, V4, that is not the Doctor. And there's something quite charming, as well as deadly, as well as inscrutable, as well as innocent, as well as terrifying. They work on many different levels, and that's a brilliant shot. The way that shot is done, because it starts from quite far away, and we're sort of on the robot, and then as the robot comes in, we go in and focus on what looks like a dead Toos. There's some very nifty camera work here. And the lights have gone a little bit dark. A very, very mad scientist. Tom Baker's eyes are gorgeous, aren't they? The actor David Weston described them to me as boiled egg eyes, which I do like. Boom! Please do not throw hands at me. Oh, I love you, D84. And I love that line, which again I hadn't remembered from the book. Isn't that just glorious? And yes, credit to Chris Boucher who was a relatively novice writer, wasn't he? And he came in and I think understood Doctor Who immediately and gave it this sort of sardonic wit, this world building that was, also the trademark of Robert Holmes, a brilliant script editor. Philip Hinchcliffe, a rigorous producer who, because this is the era famed for sort of gothic horror, so I think sometimes in our sort of memories and view of this era, we sort of forget the attempts at that when they do sci-fi, out and out sci-fi, there's still a sort of hard literary angle to the sci-fi in the way that the scary, horrific ones are from Gothic literature. This has elements and indeed ideas from Isaac Asimov. I'm not a big reader of science fiction. I'm not sure Can I say this? I'm not sure I'm a fan of science fiction, but I love Doctor Who more than anything. So that's curious, isn't it? And I mean, I've watched all of Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and all of Blake Seven, and all of The Prisoner. But I wouldn't say I'm fans of those things. I love that frozen robot with the lasers and probe in its noggin. That's brilliant. So. And I think my favourite Doctor Who's tend to be the ones with an Earth element, and I think Russell T Davies's instincts when he talked about, even if we're not on Earth, we need to tie to Earth in order to invest us as the audience. So this is where this has been very successful again, because it doesn't have that. It breaks that rule, and yet it works and makes a virtue of it, because although these aren't people making references to places that we understand, the references that they do make we buy into. The founding families is some sort of caste system, some sort of class system. There are detectives. There is a Caldor City. There is money. There is all of that stuff that means that even though we can't, we're given no image of what life on Caldor City is like. We're given enough information, and these characters are well enough drawn that doesn't matter. And that's not, I would say, that is not easy to do. and Boucher does Image of the Fendal, and then doesn't come back to Doctor Who. And I think Blake Seven's gain was Doctor Who's loss, because I think he could have done wonders with it. Or maybe we'd have had a sort of a carbon copy of Robert Holmes, or Robert Holmes, a slight variation on Robert Holmes, because there are similarities. I'm not saying there's Boucher's in any way unoriginal, because he is, but I think he shares some of Holmes's DNA. And maybe Doctor Who thrives on change, and having somebody that's a bit similar is wrong. So no regrets, but I do like Chris Boucher's stuff. The frozen robots is a fantastic idea. Again, it's quite unsettling, and murder for the actors, I would think, because I don't think they're shop window dummies. I think they're actors having to stand still. This piping on the banister bits of the set does look a little bit drawn on, but actually in that shot it doesn't look like it's drawn on, but when it goes down the corner at the bottom, it does look a little bit felt tippy, even though it's not. D84 pool is damaged. Poor old pool. Yeah, look at those actors. That's an actor on 1 foot on the stairs. Good for you. Tom Baker, very dark and brooding and full of sort of simmering energy there. You believe that he's timeless, isn't he? I know he's got big 70s hair, but it doesn't look like big 70s hair. It looks like Doctor Who's hair. Whereas you watch other programmes set in the 70s and people have big hair, it looks like you're in the 1970s. I don't think this looks like the 1970s. I said he was a hunter, all that about body language. That's so clever. And that's good use of Leela as well. Robots-phobia. And Robots-phobia, of course, is Robots-phobia. 2 things I've done. I've done 2 things called Robots-phobia. The first ever special feature on a DVD I did was called Robots-phobia. And I accepted that with open arms, because the DVD range had been going for a bit. So this was the special edition of it's the one I'm watching, the special edition. I'm on this disc of the Robots of Death. Sorry to talk through Russell Hunter being very, very good here. And this backstory, which vindicates Ivanov and shows that actually with Zilda's brother he was doing a decent thing. That's all great stuff, because it's just all texture for the plot and for the character. But it's well wrought. It gives the actor something good to do, and it's an unexpected twist on what we thought we knew about the character earlier on. Very detailed, very good. But yeah, I did this documentary. It was I'd done commentaries, obviously, but my first on-screen presenting, and I thought at that time only. So as I say, I accepted it with open arms. Pronounced Karel Čapek wrong. We actually did it with 2 different takes, pronouncing it 2 different ways, but neither of them the correct way. I think I said Kapech, which on the day we were just frantically went, should we do that? And we should have, yeah. Anyway, I wasn't the director. That was Richard Higson, lovely Richard Higson, did this great thing and gave me the great honour of, presenting my first thing on a DVD, and we did it in a lady's house. It's a 1950s house, which is gorgeous, and it's quite fun, and it's just a bit of frippery, and I thought that was it. I'm presenting a documentary. Didn't know I'd do any more. And then I did a big Finnish play, which is the second one I did, but the first one that came out, called Robots-phobia. So if anybody's making anything called Robots-phobia, I'm afraid I have to be in it. That's the law. So I've got Robots-phobia twice on my CV, and they're 2 different things. And yes, Tus and Ivanov just spent the rest of the episode going off blowing up robots now. But now, I talked through the bit in the hopper, where I talked through all of it. I've got to talk through all of it. That's the thing. Duncan Harvey says, when Leela and Tus are in the hopper, and Leela says, because that wasn't SV7. Why does she say this? I've never been able to understand why this isn't SV7. Am I being thick? I just think it's clumsily done, Duncan. I think what she means is that SV7 has had his command circuit overridden, and so is now not operating as SV7 should, and that's why he didn't recognise. I think it has to be that. And because they recognise people vocally through the command print, I think it's just slightly clumsily done. But I do agree, it does kind of stick out. It does kind of stick out slightly. Let me in, and there he is. It's Dusk. Dusk is the bad guy, who's now painted himself like a robot and changed his jacket, so he doesn't have the Dusk's jacket, which is the one that I wore. And Gary mentioned that this robot is the only one that doesn't have a nameplate, and that's quite right. Which is not something I had noticed in the 30 times I have watched this before. Yes, Borg's probably. I think there was a scene filmed with Borg about to get killed that got cut, or they didn't have time to film it. But and yes, of course, Borg is the big and strong one. Body language, Leela, that's right. Oh God, I've just had that image of those publicity photos of Leela where she's slightly sort of given makeup, browned up, would you say? And I mean, I remember when I first saw it, I said, why did she look like she's got coffee on her face? And I went, oh no, have they tried to sort of brown her up, which would have been really unfortunate. And we must be relieved that they didn't do that. But they did. They change her eye colour, don't they? Yes. So that's not Louise Jameson's natural eye colour, as we will discover when we get to the horror of Fang Rock. Those bruises on Pamela Salem's neck are pretty grim, aren't they? She's been through the war, poor old Toos. Good names as well, aren't they? Toos and Uvanov. Uvanov is a brilliant name. Uvanov, I thought he was called. There's quite a few names. I might do a podcast about names that when you read them in the Target books or whatever, or saw them written down and then heard them for the first time. I've still not got over crinoid. The crinoid. And now this is nifty, isn't it? Because they've established that people are recognised by their voice print. Again, yeah, and they don't know what Taran Capel looks like. I think Caldor City, you need to pay more attention to faces. I'm all for not judging by appearances, but I think, I think a photo fit is not an unnecessary thing to add to the list of things when you're compiling your dossier on megalomaniac scientists on the run. But yes, the fact that we recognise people because their voice printers on the command circuit. Look at that, and that's great. The shadow of the robot, poor old Pool carrying in front of it. And here's a line you can have some fun with, I think. Is this the one? It's always amused me as a child. And he's got a... So is this where he says the... I think... I mean, I'm pausing now just for a terrible double entendre. No, it's not the way... He's got... Anyway, but yes, here we are. Here's Pool carrying in front of the see-through door that has the shadow of the robot. That's really spooky stuff. You know, this is it's Saturday tea time. This is as close Doctor Who gets to sort of alien, scary, terrifying stuff on a sort of space vessel sort of thing. Look at that. That's brilliant. The smoking robot coming through the door. This is action-packed Doctor Who. I think you're quite right, Ivanov. Off you go to blow things up. That was a great sequence. This is stuff with two supporting characters who we never see again. Not in TV's Doctor Who. I know both actors returned to the roles, which is delightful. Whereas David Bailey played the Celestial Toymaker for Big Finish. And Miles Fothergill, SV7, a picture turned up of him on the set of Blake 7 the other day where he was incredibly buff. And sometimes baddies where of our brothers from bondage and we will be irresistible. We will release more of our brothers from bondage, and we will be irresistible. I mean, there's certain parties where you can say that, and it means an entirely different thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want a double entendre, I'll give you one. So yeah, you've got the helium thing. I've never done the inhaling helium thing, although I seem to think it's all the rage. I know my son has told me that some of he and his friends have done it at parties, inhaling helium from a balloon. I think it can be quite dangerous. So it's one of those things when you have teenage sons, you just have to be a bit bolshy about, but know that no matter what you say, they're going to do the things anyway. Oh, it's hard being a parent. And who'd have thought that? Yes, but D84. Oh, that is. He didn't even get to do anything brave, you think, but of course he does shortly after. But that's horrible. And you know, the Doctor is clearly upset, which is quite right, because Tom Baker's Doctor is not always upset when something bad happens to people. In fact, I think he's more upset about D84 than he is about sort of Vash or even Lawrence Scarman. But that's what sort of keeps you guessing with Tom Baker, that sometimes unpredictable, sometimes difficult, but always otherworldly Doctor. He's good, isn't he? Yeah, lucky he's got no eye for art. Yeah, we might get a chance to use one of these. So I'm going to burn out your brain very, very slowly. So this is where the Laserson probe is used to torture the Doctor. Everybody says, doesn't he, don't say you're one of those boring villains that's going to gloat. So we got a little bit what you would nowadays call meta. And it's the sort of thing that I think Tom Baker had a bit more fun with later on. But everybody's taking the whole thing so seriously. It doesn't come across like that in such a way. Great shot of Leela in the cupboard. Camera work is so good, but even the sound effects as well. It's just a very serious, a production of serious intent, albeit one that's being made for children's television at tea time with a man with it's a production with serious intent, says Toby. Immediately cut to a man with silver and green face. but yes, nonetheless. I think it is. And of course, the kids watching will be going, oh, yeah, his voice is changing. And you're slightly one step ahead of the villain. Now, why he doesn't notice his voice has changed doesn't really matter. It's a nifty way that has been seeded to overcome the villain, and D84 is going to do his thing. Gregory DePaulnay, who plays D84, became a great voice teacher at RADA, or drama teacher at RADA, and in fact, my friend Mark, I know because he's done other drama schools too. Mark, with whom I did the "Do Not Throw Hands at Me" thing that we then did on a film set. I remember all my mates had left Manchester and I stayed. And I remember sort of living in a bit of sort of limbo. I got a call out of the blue from my friend Mark. Oh, and Mark, hello, goodbye, my friend. Well, I'm talking about a friend, Mark, who I'm talking about. Yes, he rang me out of the blue, and he was at drama school and said, "Our teacher of voice, he's called Gregory DePaulnay. He's D84." And he was chuffed because it's the one sort of Doctor Who thing that he would sort of know anyway. And he immediately rang me to tell me, which I thought was lovely, because it was when we'd all sort of dissipated a little bit. And Mark and I then didn't speak again for ages, and have occasionally over the years. And then he got in touch fairly recently because his kids love Doctor Who, and through that... his son Dylan listened to my Doctor Who scarf and sent me some artwork, and that is the artwork for this series of podcasts and videos, and that's all done by Dylan Patterson, son of Mark, and so his Dylan's dad has seen the Robots of Death, and that's what started the long road to this broadcast having a logo. I like how it all comes together. I don't think it matters that I've talked through the ending massively. I mean, it is definitely worth acknowledging that D84's self-sacrifice is very sad, and he gets to say goodbye, my friend, and that makes me a little bit sad and a little bit teary. I like the treatment of the robots' voices that gives it the repeated cool, cool, and reminds us that they're mechanical for all their beauty and charming diction. When that goes wrong, it's a robotic process. So actually, yeah, voice becomes very interesting in all sorts of areas in this episode. Yeah, I wish there was a chance to be a little sadder about D84 within the episode. It's quite, there's no. This had been an American thing. He might have had some sort of space funeral. And I've had to look. I love the Doctors. I mean, in any other person, that sort of I'm a Time Lord, all this sort of thing, it would seem arrogant, but he does it in such a sort of throwaway. He's got intensity, but he's got a sort of throwaway quality about him as well, which is sort of, it's paradoxical and contradictory, but it works. Oh, a fade, another fade. So, right, 3 out of the 4 episodes fades into the titles. Why do I care? I don't know. I just like noticing things. And what I've noticed about the Robots of Death is that it never fails to deliver top marks to everybody involved. I mean, I did pick on the 2 or 3 tiny moments that never quite work for me. That's interesting because that's contrary to what I'm intending to do with this. But I think it's because I've taken for granted that everyone will agree with me that this is absolutely brilliant. So it seems less egregious of me to point out the bits that somehow stick out as being bits where they either dropped that didn't achieve what they wanted to. But there are so many bits where things that could be done serviceably are done in an exemplary manner. I think I say it's a 9 out of 10. Do you know what? I might think it's a 10. And I don't give 10s very often. I don't score things on this podcast. I'm just talking about my own personal scoring system, which I'll occasionally, every now and again, sit down and score Doctor out of 10. Why not? I've got shelves to put up. I've got children to influence and educate. I've got a partner to pay attention to. I've got a dog to walk. But no, I've got money to earn and scripts to write and CVs to send off. And but I'll score Doctor out of 10 because I feel it's important. I do think that's great. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you came into it loving it, or if you came into it not loving it, that's maybe helped you to go and look at it and see it in a positive light. So my favourite things, I said that it's going to be hard to choose. I'm probably not going to choose an actor, which is my default because I do so enjoy the performances in Doctor Who, but I think I'm gonna choose the cast. I think it's so well cast that they sort of deserve they get a best ensemble nod at the international Emmys because I think they're very, very. Or am I? No, I have to, because I also like the world building of Boucher's script. I really like the world building, and that includes what he does with the characters. But also, there's the design, from costume set to lighting. So I've got 3 things there. And I can choose 2. So 1 strictly should be for episode 4, and 1 should be, an overall bonus thing. But, the cast and the design and the world building is all in episode 4. So that's okay. So what's going to be, kids? Cast. Well, do you know what? I'm always choosing the blooming actors because I am one, and because, well, if you've listened to enough of these, you don't need me to explain what. You don't need me to give you evidence. So do you know what? I'm going to choose And because it's not a Robert Holmes script either, I'm going to choose The World. And I think because The World has lived on, there have been Caldor City spin-offs, and Big Finish has revisited The World and continues to do so. To have made such an impact with 4 episodes to create a society that has sustained itself and that has come back, but not in the TV series, and yet there's still enough on television to give you so much of that backstory and that world and the characters who inhabit it. So the world building, Caldor, all of that, the society. And I think, because I don't often enough, the design, which is going to be Kenneth Sharp's set design, Elizabeth Waller's costume design, and Duncan Brown's lighting design, and the makeup and Briggs is it. I think we called it production design, the whole, and the visual effects, Richard Conway's visual effects. So I think the design as an all-encompassing, which is often Doctor Who falls down in one area through no fault of anybody's, because it's the nature of, the sheer ambition of the show and the resources available to it. So I think when it fires on all cylinders visually, that needs to be celebrated. So I'm sorry, Russell Hunter, Pamela Salem, David Bailey, David Collins, Brian Croucher, Greg Reader, Paul Ney, Tanya Rogers, Tarek Yunus, Miles Fothergill, and all the robot actors. You do deserve a collective nod, but this time it's gonna it's your Martin Scorsese moment. I'm afraid you get an honourable mention, but you're not gonna take the gong. So I wonder if Gary will choose any of those things. Let's see what Gary Russell has chosen. I'm not going to win this one, because I don't think I've got any of the things. I will see it as a victory if he chooses one of the things I choose.
My favourite thing in episode 4 is it's the reveal. It's the reveal of Dask as Taran Capel, which comes at a brilliant moment, because I remember thinking, even back then, I wasn't sure who the villain was. I mean, the body count was pretty high. There weren't that many options. And yet somehow that moment where you start with Tus and Ivanov in the pilot control area, and Dask is trying to get in, and they're going, no, don't let him in. The doctor, don't let him in. And then it cuts to the outside, and Dask is there in full SV7 style costume with the green face and the silver lining, and he's looking like a human robot. And I loved it. I loved it then, and I love it even more now. David Bailey's performance is magnificent. And so the reveal of Dask is fantastic. And then it's so beautifully paid off towards the end of the episode, where you have the Doctor strapped to a sort of a gurney, and there's the big Laserson probe about to be dropped into him. And the Doctor looks up at Dask, Taran Capel, and says, oh, I suppose you're going to give me one of those boring megalomaniac speeches about your master plan, blah, blah, blah. And in a way that is completely and utterly based on Goldfinger, Taran Capel, Dask just goes, no, I'm going to kill you. Love it, love it. So the reveal of Dask as the villain and the way it is done and the portrayal into his madness is just my favourite thing of episode 4. And then you ask for a fifth thing, which is very easy for me, because it's the main reason I love Robots of Death. It is a very rare case of Doctor Who successfully in just 4 episodes, actually successfully in really episode 1, in one big sequence in episode 1, where all the crew talk about the death of Chubb, and it starts with Ivana going, one of you murdered him, and everyone goes, well, one of us, surely, and he goes, that's what I said, and you get this whole realization these people don't like each other. And for me, the thing that makes Robots of Death so brilliant is the world building, is the design element and everything coming together. So you have these people who are trapped on a sand miner, who've got time to, probably an hour every day, to make their faces up and wear the most stupidly ludicrous costumes. And they have all these Art Deco sets, and everything is beautiful for them, and they are beautiful people, and they think they're beautiful people, and they have the time to do this because this is a robot-led society. They have nothing else to do. Once every 5 or 6 days, some Lucanol or something turns up, and they all run and they press their buttons and they capture the Lucanol, and then they go back to doing nothing, and the robots run everything. And that sense of world building and that sense of how they actually hate each other. They aren't friends. They're barely colleagues. There's nothing but distaste and distrust between them. Boucher's script is just magnificent. Every line, there's no lines wasted, there's nothing wasted. And he creates, and particularly in episode 1, he creates this world, and it's beautiful, it's amazing, and it's very rare in Doctor Who that something is so complete that you know everything that's going on, you know the history of everything, you got all the stuff about the first families and all of that, it's all there with this beautiful dialogue, and added to it is the fantastic sets and the costumes and the makeup, and of course the beautiful, beautiful robots. The Vought robots are just one of the most beautiful creations in the history of Doctor Who. So that's my 5th big reason for why I love this story, and I hope you enjoy watching it, Toby, because if you don't, I shall be very upset, and frankly, I shall think very little of you. I shall tell everyone that you're the person that doesn't like robots to death, and nobody will ever want to give you a cup of tea ever again. Cheers, Toby. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks, Gary. Now, see what he did there? He chose both of my things, but called them one thing, because he called the world building, the scripting, and the design, which was very canny of him. I don't care. I don't care whether I win. I mean, I do want to win one. That's my aim. Because I don't know what episode this is going to be, but I still haven't won. But I don't care. But he made me think there as well. Again, what I've really enjoyed about this process is occasionally being given an alternative insight. And not just, somebody loves a story I think's a bit naff, because that's not what's happened here. But that idea about the decadence and them hating each other. And people hating each other can be a bit boring in drama. I mean, I'm sure when we get to a 5th, 6th Doctor and Perry story, they don't hate each other, but the bickering sometimes doesn't quite work. And I think it's a shame for those two actors, who I think are great and do much better when they get on. Is that bickering can sometimes be childish and annoying. But here it's not. It utterly works, and the dialogue sings, and the characters work, and the actors do it well. And you could, if you were ungenerous, look at those costumes and go, well, they're impractical. Well, certainly the hats, but I love the hats. And that's silly, wacky, space-age designer thinking. But it's not. They're designed to reflect the fact that these people don't have to do all that much. So they, as he says, take an hour putting their makeup up and tart themselves up and preen. And we live... I mean, as I'm recording this, there's a bit of consternation about influencers going to Dubai during lockdown to take photos of themselves and preen. And I've seen a little bit, not the influencer world, but I've seen a little bit of the world of people who spend an awful lot of time on their appearance because of, and I feel for them in a way because the world that they've decided to inhabit is one where you are scrutinized all of the time. And the image that is given out is, but look, we're one of the beautiful people and everything comes to us. Well, one, you have to work to maintain that image, and it's built on rocky foundations because we all age and crumble. But two, it doesn't give you happiness. And you see a lot of sort of bitching and avarice and crabbiness and backstabbing and all those sorts of things in that world, which wants to present itself as nirvana, as heaven, as Shangri-La, as, this is where the beautiful people are. Isn't it wonderful? Don't you want to be us? But you're not happy. These people are not happy. And these people, they go back stinking rich. They have a job where they can lounge around. They preen, they spend all, they get made up. They're comfortable. But they hate each other. It doesn't bring you happiness. And as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that there are a lot of things that I think I see other people doing that would be the key to making me happy. They're being exhibited by people who aren't happy. Because there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And if there is, you'd bang my shins on it. Put the gold in my pockets and they'd break. So I like that idea that this decadence has underneath it a core of dislike and sadness and anger and bitterness and spite, because that's a lesson to us all. Whereas what does make me happy is Doctor Who. It's a children's television program about as people that paint their faces silver and green, uh, and a sweet robot detective who sacrifices himself, and all of those things. I've really enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed that as well. I think we should give the robots of death a big hand, but whatever you do, please don't throw it at me. Sadly, since I recorded this commentary, David Bailey, who played Dask, who I mentioned quite a lot over the 4 episodes and in the present tense, has passed away at the age of 83. What an interesting, enigmatic actor he was. Of course, he played the celestial toymaker for Big Finish, and of course, having had a sabbatical in the 80s, where I think, did I mention this? He had a sort of carpentry business. He was certainly an expert in making furniture. He then went back to the acting profession, taking it by storm by appearing in Gladiator and 3 of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. So what a career he had. But I just wanted to address the fact that in the commentary, I refer to him as still being around because I recorded it before he died in early March. You were listening to Happy Times and Places. Thanks for doing so. The presenter was me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest was Gary Russell, who can be found on Twitter at Twilight Streets. Thanks to patrons who include Paul Dykes, Andrew East, David Gillespie, Charles Gears, Lisa Gledhill, Paul J. Guest, Steve Hatcher, Duncan Harvey, Simon Hodges, Sam Hollingsworth, Matthew Houliston, Darren Howard, Gregory Hudson, Paul Ingerson, Robert Jewell, Christopher Joyce, Judith Jackson, Jeff Kaplan, William Keith, Andy Kitching, Hendrik Korzeniowski, Andrew Llewellyn, Nate Lynch, and Sean McAllister. The music for this podcast is specially composed by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson. You can support these podcasts at patreon.com/Toby Haydoke, where there are early releases, there is exclusive material, and there's also the chance to get a badge or 2, plus lots of other lovely stuff for as little as £3 a month. Or you could just do a one-off donation at ko-fi.com/Toby Haydoke. Everything is appreciated in these trying times, and I'll churn out as much as I possibly can as a result. And please subscribe to this YouTube channel. And also, if you could rate and review this podcast anywhere you find it as positively as you can, that just really helps, and that costs you nothing. I have a website, www.tobyhaydoke.com, and also on twitch.tv/XSmalarkey. That's just an X and an S and then Malarkey. My comedy night that's been running in Manchester every Tuesday for 24 years continues online during the pandemic. I will be introducing 4 special guests from the international comedy circuit for live comedy every Tuesday at 8 p.m. GMT.